We're back now with Randy Ledford from Pawnee Bill State Park and Vicki Mason, who's from Quartz Mountain State Park in southwestern Oklahoma. Randy, let's start out talking a little bit about some of the trails that the Parks Department maintains for people around the state.
Well, Paul, as you know, there are a lot of miles, as we mentioned earlier. Especially in the eastern half of the state, you'll find trails ranging from a half a mile in length to more than 60 miles in length to suit different needs for people.
So when we talk about trails, you don't necessarily have to be a well-outfitted backpacker and have all the latest gear and technology with you. You can just go out if you just want to do a day hike or just a hike of a couple hours. I guess there's a trail there for you.
You bet, that's correct.
Well, there's several different kinds of trails. How can people find out what they're looking at and what's going on the trails?
Well, some of the best information gained is through the park itself that you visit. Check with the visitor center staff, nature center staff, or the park office. Really, give them a call or visit them, and or check with the Oklahoma City office for current trail conditions and or what is out there through the trails brochure that we do offer free of charge to the public.
Well, Vicki, I guess at the different trails where there are nature centers or park offices, they can get the brochures and learn about the trails they're going to be on.
That's correct, and some of our trails are actually interpretive trails that provide a little guidebook for folks, and these are often utilized by people with smaller children who aren't able to hike rapidly, and that the parents can really get involved with their kids in discussing different aspects of the trails that they are hiking on.
Well, the trails, I know there's a trail book, Oklahoma Trail Guide, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a little bit. The trail guide will tell the people what kind of trail is available for the out there as far as the degree of difficulty. Is that right, Randy?
That's correct, Paul. Some of the trails, especially in southeast Oklahoma, we pick out the Ouachita Mountains.
Okay.
There are some steep grades on some of the trails, such as the ones in the National Forest around Cedar Lake.
Okay, we've got some slides here we're going to show, just to kind of show the folks what they can expect to see. You mentioned down at Cedar Lake, I guess there's like over 120 miles down in the Ouachita Mountains for people to hike.
There's a lot of room for recreating on trails in the Ouachita Mountains and equestrian trails as well. So you might encounter horses occasionally on some of these trails in Oklahoma. For the most part, there are trails for horses and for people and so forth. But there are some crossovers, and you're right, in the Ouachita Mountains, there's a lot of miles. Some of these trails connect with each other. So again, you don't have to go 100 miles if you don't want to. If you just want to stop for the day and enjoy the park or the recreation area or the national forest, then you can.
Well, Vicki, this is a good way for people to get out and see wildlife, to get on some of these trails.
Right. In some of the trails that are heavily traveled, folks who want to see wild animals might try and hike at a time of day when not everybody else is doing that, early morning prior to sundown. Also finding trails where people don't tend to hike as frequently. Some of the state parks, such as Quartz Mountain, have trails that are not marked, and a lot of people simply do not explore these areas, and those are excellent for wildlife viewing.
I know a couple of weeks ago we talked about the new Oklahoma Watchable Wildlife Viewing Guide, and this guide has a lot of information on the different areas in the state, some of the parks and where there are trails, and it tells about the different types of wildlife you can see. Let's talk a little bit about some of the trail etiquette, I guess you can say. We talked about that earlier, Vicki.
We appreciate it if folks would please pack out what they bring in, whether this is a long several-day backpack or just a day hike. If you're carrying a soda container or you're eating your lunch, please bring your trash pack out with you. Another thing that we are concerned with are picking wildflowers and just how people observe wildlife. Collection within the state park is not permitted by the general public, and so we do ask that people observe and then leave what they do find. Also, staying on the trails can be very important. Our trails in some areas are rather through sensitive areas, and if folks decide to make their own trail, they're going to have a negative effect on the trail that is existing.
Well, Randy, some of these areas, I guess some of these ecosystems are pretty fragile, and we ask people not to rip down trees or to take something home they think might look good in their front yard.
That's correct. The trails are used by a lot of people, and it takes everybody's effort to preserve and maintain the beauty and the special living museums that we have out there. And For example, Beaver's Bend has such a great diversity of plants and animals in that particular state park and area. It's very unique for the state, and we need everybody to pitch in and help us to maintain and preserve those areas for our children and so forth. So it's an important thing, but we also want them to get out there and use these places too.
Randy, speaking of use, are there any of the trails in the state where people can go out overnight if they want to take a longer hike and do some camping?
Yes, sir. There are some longer trails. We've already talked about southeast Oklahoma, but there's some very good backpacking opportunities in the Ouachitas as well as in northeastern Oklahoma as well.
Well, when folks go out and camp, I guess we want to remind them not to just rip down anything if they want to make a small fire to heat their food if they don't have a backpack or stove, just to take stuff that's already on the ground.
That's correct, and sometimes people can have their little stove with them, as you say, and so it's true. Again, we go back to the ethics and taking care of what we've got, what we've borrowed from our children, so to speak.
Well, one of the fastest ways, and unfortunately I found this out myself a few times, to go out and ruin an outing is to not quite be prepared for it. And Vicki, I guess there's a few things folks should take with them or think about before they go out on a day hike.
They really should, and something I think is vitally important, a lot of people don't think about until they're home with blistered feet, is correct footwear. This is particularly important if you're climbing around in the Wichita Mountain areas, be it the Wildlife Refuge or some other places where these rocks really do require a good solid shoe or light boot. Other things folks should remember is taking clothing. If it gets rapidly cold or we start having rain, you may want some extra clothing with you. And water, particularly in the summer, take water with you.
This time of year it would be, that's a must.
That's
people.
right. It certainly is.
Well, there is a brochure people can get, and this is the Oklahoma Trails Guide. And this brochure can be gotten. There's an address we'll throw on the screen, and people can look to see. You can write the Recreation Department in Oklahoma City, Tourism and Recreation, and that phone number is 1-800-652-6552, and you get more information about trails in our state. Randy, let's talk just a little bit about, other than hiking trails, there's some other types of trails that are out there for the people to enjoy.
You bet, Paul. Included in this trail brochure, you'll find outlined on the canoe trails, as they're called. We mentioned the equestrian trails earlier, and in addition, the off-road vehicle trails, or areas for these people to go and enjoy their motorcycle outings and those kinds of things for those people. But of course, we certainly don't want to mix the dirt bikes with our nature trails, because there's different uses for these areas, and it's better not to mix them in most cases.
Randy and Vicki, we're just about to run out of time. I want to thank you for coming on and talking about the different trails. It's a great way for people to get out and enjoy our state. I want to thank you for coming all the way up here to Oklahoma City from the eastern western part of the state. And that's about it for this week's show. Let's stay tuned now for the Outdoor Report.